It's the ERP Confab. I'm David Essex, industry editor at TechTarget's ERP website. For decades, some of the most sophisticated technology has been dedicated to the complex task of moving a huge volume of goods through warehouses and keeping track of inventory. From barcodes and RFID tags and readers to automated conveyor systems, voice picking, warehouse control software, and more recently robots, developments in warehouse automation and logistics continue to play an essential role in supply chain management. London-based Dexory is pushing the leading edge with its warehouse intelligence system that combines stock scanning robots, analytics software, AI, and digital twins to achieve what it claims is near perfect inventory accuracy and more efficient warehouse operations. My guest is Dexory CEO Andrei Danescu. In the podcast, we discuss how the COVID-19 pandemic changed logistics, whether warehouse AI and robotics pose a threat to people's jobs, and the near-term implications of warehouse data intelligence for the as yet unrealized goal of end-to-end supply chain visibility. Andre, the pandemic was probably the biggest shock to the supply chain any of us have seen in decades. It presented a whole bunch of big challenges. For one thing, in logistics, there were huge disruptions in shipping and trucking, along with labor shortages, but also a big change in omni-channel commerce with more direct-to-consumer deliveries as more people were having things delivered to their homes. That all happened a few years ago now. So I'm wondering what now, as of mid-2024, when the pandemic has mostly subsided, what are the challenges now, looking back in the rearview mirror, but also looking at where we stand today?
So that's definitely an interesting point there. For us as a company, it's been one of the driving forces that convinced us or propelled us to adapt and apply our technology specifically for logistics and make sure that we over-index on that. I think exactly like you said, the pandemic has impacted everyone and has changed our habits and behaviors quite a bit, to be honest. A lot of businesses decided to move their operations online. Some of them have returned back to more traditional brick and mortar store, more traditional conventional store presence. But I think the vast majority of the online presence and the vast majority of the online operations are pretty much here to stay. What that did for us and what that did for the logistics industry, it on one hand created a big opportunity because a lot more people were relying on the logistics side of things, on the operational side of things to reach their customers. But on the other hand, it also presented a big challenge because everyone wanted products with the same day delivery. Everyone wanted their goods to be perfectly delivered. The buying habits changed quite a lot. And this means, on one hand, of course, there's a big opportunity, there's more business to be had. But on the other hand, you also need to fulfill that commitment to the customers and make sure that also everything you do is as efficient as possible. So, it's fine buying things, but a lot of the time, maybe they don't quite fit right. So there's also a big return logistics operation which we need to account for. So, like I said, the name of the game became efficiency and how can we operate this supply chain and logistics networks as efficiently as possible. So I think, on one hand, we touched on some of the benefits, but on the other hand, there's also big challenges and big transformation that it led throughout the wider industry.
How specifically can AI and robots, and maybe the combination of the two, it's probably too big of a question really to ask. It's almost like the topic of the whole podcast, but how can that help to meet these challenges that we're seeing today?
So it is a big topic, exactly like you said, and I think the combination of AI and robotics has been utilized for quite some time now, and quite frankly, I think they're two separate parts of technology. So artificial intelligence systems can exist in complete isolation from any kind of robots, for any kind of physical systems. And robotic systems can also exist without being autonomous, without being tied with any more advanced intelligence systems. Now, I think for logistics specifically, it's a very interesting combination, because on one hand, like we touched a lot on some of the changes that the pandemic brought forward for the industry. On one hand, you have a big opportunity. On the other hand, you have big challenges. And there's a massive labor shortage. So being able to augment existing workforce, being able to create a better work environment for people, is actually one of the big advantages that you can deliver using this combination of AI and robotics.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about it, using an AI system, or even using an advanced software system to completely optimize the operation, to make sure that people don't end up wasting efforts focusing on the wrong things, can be a massive value driver for any business. When you're operating on a million square feet warehouse, if you have 10 wrong instructions in your work instructions on a daily basis, you could end up spending thousands and thousands of steps and thousands of wasted man hours or effort hours on trying to get the right product, but then ending up sending the wrong product to the wrong customer. So I think this combination is really an interesting driver of efficiency. But in industries where it's quite hard to get the right level of support, it's quite hard to operate in these environments, it can be a massive value add for the existing workforce. It really makes people's jobs easier and better.
I'm wondering how critical the AI driven autonomous robots are in providing the real time data that's needed at the higher levels of the supply chain. Because, to the degree that I understood your offerings, it looks like it's not just the robots and the AI, but it's the data and the analytics
Yeah.
apparently being collected more effectively by robots under your system. And so I'm wondering if you can kind of talk about that part of what Dexory offers.
So I think your understanding is very good of this. So we're using autonomous robots to collect information from warehouses. That was one of the big discoveries we've had, diving deeper and deeper into the source of the problem in the wider industry. You can have online systems which are better connected, easier to exchange information, but once the goods actually enter a warehouse, it becomes very difficult to collect this information. So the actual data capturing becomes very difficult, because if you think of warehouses, they're pretty big, in general, massive spaces. The racking systems are quite tall, and to get a detailed view of what's going on in there, you can't really rely on going aisle by aisle, location by location, because it's a very time consuming job, and it's very difficult to actually bring this data set together. So the combination that we use autonomous robots. They can navigate the warehouse, they go around the warehouse, and they basically create a digital twin of the environment. Now, why this is important is because it gives us the opportunity to extract insights from this data. So it's great to collect the information, you get raw data, but unless you can actually transform it into something useful, it becomes very difficult for any warehouse operators or warehouse users to benefit from the advantages it can bring. So the combination of autonomous robots, it means that you can collect the information without any kind of user interaction, without disrupting the existing workflow. You can collect this information in very busy warehouses, and applying the latest artificial intelligence developments, algorithms, and systems to it allows you to really dig deep and learn new things from this information, learn new things from data. That's one of the biggest advantage, and that's one of the biggest drivers. So we can close the visibility gap, we can collect the data, but then we can drive new learnings, and we can create new ways of optimizing the business by extracting this information and transforming the data, the raw data, refining that into insights.
It sounds like you're saying that even though as we know, there's been IT in warehouses now for decades, and some amazing things have been going on, like with RFID, and even you can even still include barcodes in that, and Wi-Fi and all that. But was it a bit of a black hole of information, so to speak, in terms of the whole supply chain? In other words, before something like Dexory came along and this kind of use of autonomous robots and AI and the data analytics portion, it was hard for people who wanted to like maybe include the warehouse information in the bigger picture of supply chain management or supply chain visibility. Is that what was going on before, and is that one part of why this is so important?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm totally in agreement with what you're mentioning. The warehouse is very much considered a black hole for information because it's very hard and, like I was mentioning earlier, very time consuming to extract this information. So before we released the Dexo review and released the product and technology into the market, you could maybe scan 100, 200 pallet locations in an hour. What we've managed to bring to the industry is the ability for scanning over 100,000 pallets in a day in 24 hours. So we can scan over 10,000 pallets in an hour. You can have that real-time view, visibility, continuous visibility over the warehouse operation, which in turn allows you to really optimize the way you're running the day-to-day operations in a warehouse or in a network of warehouses as well. The interesting part about our product offering is that Dexory View, which is the actual product that the customers use, is a software platform, is a cloud-based digital twin platform. But what's really unique about it is its power, the real-time data element, the day-to-day data collection in warehouses, is done through autonomous robots. What this means is if you think of a if you're running 10 warehouses, for example, each of them running, I don't know, 50, 60,000 pallets, you have one platform in which you can access this information from any location anywhere in the world. So you have continuous visibility across the operation. You know where all the products are, you know how best the spaces are performing, how well everything is being utilized. But also, it allows it to learn and tell you over time how to best structure, how to best organize the warehouse for various types of products you might be selling, various types of conditions. Say you want to run during summer period on reduced workforce because people are going on holiday, it's a slower period. It allows you to create that level of optimization. That means you can run your business at 100% efficiency. That's the name of the game, efficiency, because the logistics industry is very much relying on extracting that last percentage points of efficiency.
A lot of the kind of vision that I think I'm picking up on here and that I've seen on your website, it seems like it still depends a lot on end to end supply chain visibility, which is something different industries have sought. And I think it sounds like it's more feasible, let's say, in electronics and automotive, because you've got good coding, RFID, in parts, and then in the full machine, and then it goes off in the consumer, and you can do after service and product as a service and all sorts of things through that visibility. And yet there's other industries, food is probably one of the big ones, where you have lots of small providers, who often don't have the good data collection ability where they're producing the initial raw material or produce. I'm just wondering, isn't there still like a huge integration problem, but also data collection problem across all the many players in a typical supply chain? Isn't there still a lot of work that needs to be done for a lot of this to work well?
I think there's still a lot of work that we are doing, we're actively doing, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done to integrate everything end to end. I think Dexo Review is a relatively new product into the market. So just looking at how quickly the market embraced the offering and embraced the product, it's a clear testimony to how big the problem is and how excited people are to solve the problem. Exactly like you mentioned, I think getting everyone to agree on what is the common standard, what is the common platform in which we want to be exchanging this information is already a mammoth task. So what we've done with Dexo Review is provided that seamless platform for information exchange. So in order to provide visibility, first we kind of need to agree how we can exchange information to drive that visibility. To give you an example, even in warehouses which have 4 or 5 different customers, let's say it's a third-party logistics warehouse, 4 or 5 different customers means you could end up having 4, 5, 6, 10 different IT systems and different parts of infrastructure that may or may not be working together. So for warehouse operators, it's already difficult to aggregate all this information to have that single source of truth. Using Dexo Review allows you to quickly add all this information in one central location. And then if you have the same customer across 4 or 5 different warehouses that you're operating, it's much, much easier to start creating that level of visibility and give them access to this information in order to provide the transparent data exchange. So in order for them, I think your example was with electronics equipment. We are working with customers that produce white goods, for example. So they get various parts, various components to feed into the production line. Now, if you don't have good visibility, if you don't have a well-organized system to allow you at any point in time to know exactly where the products are in a warehouse, there's a high chance you're going to have production line stoppages, you're going to have issues in terms of the quality, the material availability, and so on. Having this common platform, being able to speak this common language, having this end-to-end visibility also gives you a lot more robustness in terms of your supply chain operations.
If we could go back a minute to Dexory's offerings, do you make any autonomous robots, or is it that your software is compatible with different brands, or maybe you partner with robot makers?
No, we don't partner with robot makers at the moment. We are a full stack company. So we design and produce our own robots in-house. It's a very unique system, so there isn't really anyone else making something similar. But more importantly, the reason why we decided to make the robots in-house is that we had a very clear vision around the technology. We had a very clear vision around how we want to be solving this problem for the industry. So we wanted to make sure that we can produce something that customers end up loving, and that really drives that level of performance that maximizes the benefits of having Dexory View.
In your jobs before Dexory, I was reading your LinkedIn profile, you worked in the automotive industry, including developing autonomous vehicle technology for Jaguar Land Rover, and you were on some race car teams doing things like sensors, telemetry systems, data analytics. How do you think your experience from those jobs has translated into the work you're doing today?
So that's definitely an interesting story. I'll try and fit it within the time we have allocated for the podcast. Um, I think one of the biggest influences it had on me was, especially back from my experience in motorsport, looking at how much performance you can extract from sensors on the car. So if you just look at the way you're measuring things on a race car, you can say, okay, fine, I know the car is performing as expected. But when you start deriving insights, when you start going deep and understanding the operating performance envelope of a car, you combine that with the telemetry and information from the driver inputs, you can really have a very accurate picture of how that car is performing on a racetrack. Now that was an interesting to me that was fascinating, because just looking at a bunch of electronic signals, you can have a very accurate view of what's going on with a very sophisticated race car. So that's kind of one of the ideas I had behind Dexory was, what if we can actually create a system that allows us to collect information from an offline space, like a warehouse, and then transform that. And this was the really interesting part, the really important part is, how do we transform that raw data into something that allows us to make a decision, allows us to operate our business better, allows us to be more efficient, to drive better efficiency for the warehouse, and in turn basically operate the specific warehouse, that specific location, in a better way for the environment. So there's loads of applications you have for it, but a lot of it really stemmed from this fascination, I would say, with how can you take some electrical signals and then really make a decision based on that, and have an understanding on how something is performing or something is operating, hundreds of meters or kilometers away from where you're based.
This understanding you talk about, is that where you need the AI to help sort of understand the patterns or make sense of the signals?
So I think there's obviously a lot of hype around AI, and I think it's a very trendy technology, but for good reasons. There's been huge advances in the field in recent periods. What I think it allows us to do, applying it to the type of data and the type of information we're collecting, it really allows us to go very deep into extracting new insights. So exactly like you were saying, it allows us to have a much better understanding of what we're looking at, and also allows us to go deep and extract new insights, things that quite frankly weren't possible even a few years ago. It's it was too much information, too much data to be able to analyze it using the traditional method, let's say.
When we're talking about AI, I'm guessing you're probably talking about things that predate the famous generative AI, ChatGPT, like, machine learning and neural nets and things that existed before that really blew everyone's mind, I think it's fair to say, in November 2022. Or are you using a combination, some of this newer stuff that's very language sensitive and some of the prior stuff that's, maybe more about learning and machine learning and all that?
So we're very much using a combination of technologies. And exactly like you said, there's a number of different technologies that apply to different parts of our system. Even the ability to run robots and run robotic systems autonomously, a lot of people associate that with AI. The robot is capable of perceiving its environment in a very accurate and detailed way. It can make decisions based on what type of surroundings it has, what type of people are around it, or what type of objects. So if you're operating in an environment with a lot of forklifts, it will move differently than when it's moving in a very manual picking heavy area. So that's one side of the story. And of course, like we were just mentioning, you get to leverage the latest generative AI technology when you're starting to go really deep into these large data sets, when you're starting to interact with the information and to provide a user experience that allows this conversational warehouse to happen. So you would go into the platform and say, I would like you to optimize for me the warehouse layout so I can operate these very fast moving goods and be able to fulfill the latest e-commerce campaign in less than 6 hours. And it should be able to give you that optimized topology or optimized layout of a warehouse.
It's no secret that we've already had a lot of automation in warehouses and other parts of logistics where people they're collaborating with robots and automated systems. But with AI, especially since ChatGPT came along and started threatening the jobs of people like me who work with words, all of a sudden it's really important. So I'm wondering, the technology we've been talking about that Dexory is so involved in, is it another technology that could end up replacing people to the degree that it could lead to net job losses?
So that's, I think that's also an interesting comparison, because a lot of the time when you speak about robotics, you speak about automation, and a lot of the time people think about job losses, but it really depends how we're looking at it, and more importantly, what industries it will end up applying to, and it's a nuanced question, because what are the nuances of that industry? I think if we go back to the beginning of our discussion, with the pandemic, a lot of opportunity presented itself for the logistics industry. Now, working in warehouses and working in logistics is not easy. It's a difficult job. And again, considering the limitations the pandemic brought, it meant that with a lot of opportunity, the labor shortage became bigger and bigger. People wanted to build bigger warehouses, people wanted to expand operations, and there isn't an infinite pool of candidates available. So it became a lot more difficult to attract talent, and it became a lot more difficult to actually excite people to work in these environments. Now, what we've seen that our technology and other AI technologies basically made people's jobs easier. So, to a large extent, it allowed quite a big diversification in the labor market, but it also allowed the existing companies to do more with their current workforce. So, I'll give you a simple example. If you have Dexory View and you know at any point in time where your products are in the warehouse with perfect accuracy, you don't end up spending half an hour to an hour looking for a random pallet of boxes, brown cardboard boxes, somewhere in a warehouse amongst the other 50,000 pallets of brown
Mm-hmm.
cardboard boxes that you might have. So I think we're very far from a doom and gloom future where everything is automated and all of us people are without a job. I think we're at a very exciting period where we can use these technologies to really augment what we do and to allow us to move a lot faster and focus on different areas of our business.
The scenario you just described, it is, a hopeful scenario. And we're hearing it in other fields. It often involves upskilling, reskilling, some kind of new training. So I'm wondering what Dexory and maybe even some of your customers are doing to ensure that if some of the older, maybe more physical or more repetitive work is being taken over by robots, how do you move people into the higher valued things that involve maybe more thinking or more adding of value of what people can add versus what machines can do? How is Dexory trying to help with that transition with its own employees?
So I think this is again, it can be an interesting parallel to some of the advantages language-based AI technologies would bring, because going back from where you needed to have quite a lot of computer literacy skills, with the latest advancements in the field, everything becomes more conversational. We've seen a lot of progress in the smartphone markets, which means that pretty much everyone's used to cell phones, to technology that allows us to interact with machines. So making robots become better and easier to integrate with the existing workforce means that we can start becoming more familiar with them. We can have a much easier journey to make this transition. And again, going to a very physical example where you have a difficult job where you need to lift heavy objects, having the latest technology in human augmentation, so exoskeletons or other automation technologies, means that you can focus on the skill, the ability, the manipulation, the advanced tasks that we as people are very good at doing, and leave some of the heavy lifting, pun intended, to automation and machines that are better suited for that. Now, if we go back to the discussion of AI and robotics, what I think this means is that with the latest technologies, you have a system that is a lot easier to deploy with existing environments. So again, we can go back to Dexo review, we can go back to some of our robots. You can deploy them without any infrastructure changes, which means it's a lot easier to integrate with the existing processes. You don't have to continuously change what people are doing in order to bring this technology in. So the adoption and the excitement when someone makes your job easier, or something, or a technology makes your job easier, it's a lot more seamless to embrace that. It's a lot easier to understand what else could you do with that. So the upskilling and the reliance on using the latest developments becomes a lot easier from that point of view.
I think we've all read some very imaginative visions of what AI and more automation can do and could do in the future. But you seem like a very practical person who's really thought about the specifics of making this real. So, what's the realistic potential, and when, and roughly what time frame for completely transforming logistics, which I think is a vision that I saw on your website that Dexory's trying to help achieve through this better warehouse automation and data intelligence, and maybe some of the other things you're working on?
Um, this is where it gets to complicated predictions of the future, right?
Uh huh. Yeah.
But I think it's I don't want to be I don't want to be overly optimistic, because a lot of the times when you bring new technology into the market, you can move very, very fast. You can be quick at bringing the new technology out there, but a big part of that equation is how quick will customers embrace the technology, how quick will the market actually react to what you're bringing. If we look back at the logistics industry, it's been I would say, a fairly traditional industry. I think we can also go back to the beginning of our conversation. The pandemic really catalyzed transformation, because suddenly a great opportunity presented itself, but the industry realized that it needs to become a lot more robust and resilient, and it needed to transform physically and literally transform the ways doing things. So I would say in the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to see a lot more change. We're going to see a lot more of these new technologies, of the AI, coming to a level of maturity where it's really driving business transformation. But I think if we're considering let's say, a global level transformation, a global level transition to a new type of running logistics moving from supply chains to global connected supply networks, we're probably looking at more of a 5 to 10 years time horizon, to get that critical mass of players using this, sharing information, finding new ways of running these warehouses, finding new ways of running the wider supply, the global supply chain.
It'll be interesting to see. I would like to stick around to see that come to pass. Andre, I really appreciate your time coming on the podcast today.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks a lot for having me, and I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, me too.